The Penguins were unable to make it 4 in a row on Thursday night, and Pat and I are going to discuss that loss to the Kraken, plus preview the weekend in Alberta right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes. You can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Joined by my co-host, Patrick Dant. You can follow him on Twitter at Syndrome for Wet, and you can follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. Of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen/watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So, Pat, the Penguins are not able to keep the good times rolling into Thursday night. They get shut out by the Seattle Kraken by a score of 2-0. And I want to start with how the Penguins played in this one. I thought they came out with a purpose in the first period, much like that game against the Canucks on Tuesday night. I thought the first 4 to 6 minutes were great. They were firing pucks on net. Grubauer was there to make the saves, but then it continued. Unlike what happened on Tuesday where the Canucks really pushed back those final 13, 14 minutes, the Penguins just kept pushing the rest of that period, and they deserved a better fate after that first period. Philip Grubauer flat out stole it for the Kraken in that period. Sometimes you got to tip your cap to a goalie who is sub 900. That's what happens in the NHL sometimes, people. Before he was in Seattle, Grubauer was a pretty good goalie. He actually had shown promise with Washington and Colorado. So there is that version of him still in there. It just hasn't been in him since he got to Seattle. But he played really well in that first period. And of course, in typical Penguins fashion, they allow a very fluky goal, crazy bounce. Tristan Jarry is not able to track it. It's 1-0 going into the second period. I thought in the second period, the Kraken started to push back. The Penguins still, I thought, played fine. They didn't get as many chances, but they were able to get some quality ones in the later stages of the period, and I still thought they deserved a better fate than being down 1-0 heading into the third. However, once the third period started, I felt like they kind of got what they deserved by the end of this game. I thought they played a terrible third period. I know you might push back a little bit on that when I hand it over to you, but I did not like the way the Penguins played in that third period. They really didn't get any quality scoring chances. It felt like they weren't making Philip Grubauer work at all. I felt like it was a lot of perimeter play from what I was watching, and it wasn't good enough. And I also thought Seattle did a great job just smothering the Penguins. This was a classic 2016 version of the Penguins with what Seattle did. It felt very 2016 Penguins, where when the Penguins had a lead during that season, especially in the playoffs, they smothered you and suffocated you. That's what Seattle did to the Penguins, I felt like, in that third period. It's kind of a taste of Mike Sullivan's own medicine in that third period. And again, I just felt like the Penguins kind of got what they deserved at the end of it. Again, great first 20 minutes, solid second period, but you can't just, I feel like, take a period off and expect to come back even when you're down by a goal.
You are correct. I am going to push back on you on that, but I do want to start with the first thing you talked about with Grubauer. I know everybody has the compulsion to say, oh, they got goalied, oh, it happened again, all that. Philip Grubauer has a track record. He's not some no-name AHL scrub that they have sitting on the bench and they bring in every handful of games to give their starter a rest. Grubauer has a track record of being a pretty solid goaltender. Like you said, that's still in him. He's still a talented goaltender. Is he among the elite? No, but he's a very solid NHL starter, and he has shown that in the past. So you knew that a game like that for him at some point was looming. So you can't get too frustrated over that, I don't think. But I will say this. I thought the Penguins played a very solid 40 minutes. They played very well, like you said. Deserved a much better fate than what they got through 40 minutes. I also think we have to give some credit to the Seattle Kraken because they weren't great in the first two periods, maybe the first 35 or so minutes. And then they started to wake up a little bit and play in the last five or so minutes of the second period, and that carried over into the third. I think it was a case of both and, not either or. The Penguins trailed off in the third period. They did not play as well as they did through the first 40 minutes, but the Kraken also played better. And then you mix that with a goaltender who's in a groove in Philip Grubauer. The Kraken start playing a little bit better. And then the big elephant in the room, more so than usual because of the guys that are missing, the Penguins don't have a lot of guys left who can score. So you mix all those factors together and you get this game. Overall, and obviously we are very much in a time now where there are 0 moral victories. So at this point, this stinks because you got shut out, got no points at all. And now you've got 2 more games in a back-to-back in Alberta. And we're going to preview both of those on this show. But you go from a team that you're going to have tomorrow night in Calgary that's middling. So now that game is more important than it was before. And then you're going to play a juggernaut in Edmonton on Sunday. So at this point, if this team still has designs on getting back into the Stanley Cup playoffs, these next 2 games are crucial. And I don't want to say it was a wasted opportunity because they didn't throw out a poor performance against the Kraken, but they didn't come away with any points. So now there's even more importance on the rest of the weekend.
Heading into this road trip, again, I said the minimum was 2-1-1, but preferably I would like to win 3 of the 4 games coming back to Pittsburgh to play 2 metropolitan teams. And the Penguins will have that opportunity this weekend when they go to Calgary and then go to Edmonton. I said on Twitter last night, if you can get 3 out of 4 points out of this trip, I think that's okay. On the back-to-back, excuse me. If you can get 3 out of 4 points on this back-to-back, that's what you have to do at least. But if you're able to sweep it, go 3-1 overall, then the trip will be seen as a positive, unless you just go and get crushed by a middling Flames team and then a really good Oilers team on the back-to-back. But you got to go out there and get at least 3 out of 4 points this upcoming weekend. I understand what you're saying when it comes to the game as a whole, but to me, it also felt like the Penguins played their classic hits last night, right? Inability to finish, been a problem all season, worst finishing team in the league. That came back to bite them once again. Inability to perform on the power play, Pat. 0 for 3, power play at times looked okay, but a lot of other times they couldn't gain the zone, overpassing the puck, just not good enough, especially when you're facing a 1-goal deficit. The Penguins had numerous opportunities to tie the game on the power play, and they weren't able to do it. And then lastly, they got great goaltending. Tristan Jarry was kind of left out to dry. I'm not really going to blame him for the 2 goals that he allowed. They were kind of just really fluky bounces, but these have been the main classic hits for this team all season long. And if that loss didn't sum up this season as a whole, I honestly don't know what does at this point.
Yeah, you can't blame Tristan Jarry for last night. 929 save percentage, 26 saves on 28 shots. He did his job as he has all season. And like you said, it was the classic hits. Power play gets 3 opportunities. You get even one of those. Maybe this is a different game. You can't finish. You get shut out, and it's a 2-goal game. And it was a 1-goal game going into the 3rd period. So this is one of those games where we saw all the Penguin in the thing that's funny about it. We saw all the Penguins issues they've had through this season in a game where I don't think you can say they played poorly. They played fairly well, all things considered, but when you can't finish, you're getting saves, and your power play doesn't come up in the moments it's needed, this is the result you get.
Right. I mean, I don't disagree with that. Again, like, they played a great 20 minutes. They played an okay next 20 minutes, and then I felt like they played kind of a meh to just bad 20 minutes in the 3rd period, and sometimes that's not good enough to win. I mean, other times, maybe if you're playing a team that's worse than the Kraken, that's good enough, but against a team that's close to you in the standings, I mean, that's just not good enough, especially when points are at such a premium right now overall. You got to have just an overall better 60-minute effort from this team. And I also felt like the coaching was a bit lacking at times. I don't think this was Mike Sullivan's best game behind the bench. There were a couple moments that really stood out to me, one of which was actually at the end of the game, Pat. And I know that you are the president of the Jeff Carter fan club. I totally get it. Congratulations to him, by the way, on his 1300th NHL game. But the fact that he was getting 6-on-5 time at the end when the Penguins were down 2 minutes left over some of the kids like Valtteri Pussin and Drew O'Connor, that doesn't sit right with me. He kind of really wasn't doing much on the 6-on-5 to begin with, wasn't winning puck battles along the boards, wasn't firing the puck to the net. He just wasn't really doing anything out there. It was just kind of a warm body, I think. So I think that's a decision that I don't understand. Even with the two injuries that the Penguins have right now, I would rather see one of the kids out there have a better opportunity. And then some of the line juggling from Sullivan as well. I get putting Riley Smith down a little bit in the line. They kind of benched him a little bit in that third period, but moving Drew O'Connor up to the top line when he's been really good with Evgeny Malkin. I don't know, just some of the decisions that he made in this game overall, even heck, putting Carter and Eller on the top power play unit, just not his finest performance behind the bench overall.
Overall, yeah, I'm with you. I think at this point they're looking at Riley Smith as a lost cause. He can't make it work.
I would be stunned if he is on this team after next Friday. I will be
Yeah,
stunned.
I agree. And I think they're just putting him wherever they decide to put him. I can't really fault Sullivan for that. I mean, you're not going to scratch him because he hasn't been horrendous. He's been like, I want to make sure that perspective is there. He hasn't been like god awful. Like he's not a drag on the team, but he just has not fit. Like he has just been a complete disappointment. And I think at this point, Sullivan's just biding his time until Kyle Dubas trades him. I agree with the Carter stuff. As much as I do like him, as much as I'm a fan, I don't get why he continues to get big minutes in crucial moments. Last season, totally understood it. It was a shallow roster, and you played him in the position he was in out of complete and utter necessity. And then as for the power play, I mean, at this point, Sullivan's thrown his hands up, and so is Reardon, and just going, what else do you want me to do? Like I get, yes, there should be system changes and all that, but at the very least, if the personnel isn't going to start playing the way it needs to play with a man advantage, you're just throwing your hands up and going, all right, we're just going to put whoever out there because nothing has worked to this point. And you kind of beat me to it. I was going to say it before we ended the segment. I figured it was relevant given that in the news cycle here in Pittsburgh sports, there was the report from the NFLPA, the grades, and the Steelers got some pretty poor grades. On the other hand, what the Penguins did last night for Jeff Carter with his 1300th game, they fly his family in to Seattle for the game. They bring his kids in to read the starting lineup right before the game. Sullivan puts him in the starting lineup again. I know people have their takes on that, but 1,300 games, guy who's been a total professional and consummate pro with all the younger players on the team. You give him that moment. So kudos to the Penguins for that. That was really cool to see. I know I'm the Jeff Carter fan club president, but overall, I love when teams do that just because it reminds us that while this is a high stakes, big money business, it is still people that play it. And knowing that you matter to the team that you play for motivates you more to do more for that team.
I think the Penguins are one of the best organizations in all of sports when it comes to this type of thing. I mean, you saw it with, the Yager retirement ceremony. You've seen it with plenty of other things over the years as well. Not surprised that they did this for Jeff Carter. They're always first class when it comes to this stuff.
I will say this. I know that we've ragged on him. I know that he's been public enemy number one and everything, but you do have to tip your cap to Jeff Carter for playing 1,300 NHL games, because there are only a handful of people who have ever played that many games in the National Hockey League. And that puts his name right up there. And it shows that he may not be the player he once was, but this guy has found a way to carve out a role in the best hockey league on the planet. And that is not easy to do.
I agree. And the production he's had over the years has been mostly very good. He was great when he was first acquired by the Penguins. It's not his fault that Ron Hextall decided to give him that very ludicrous extension when he, I don't think, deserved it at the time, because considering after he signed it, that's when his game really started to go down. But agreed with what you said. But I think that'll do it for this first segment of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Overall, that game last night was such a slog to watch overall, just pretty boring stuff. And it's funny, in the preview for this Seattle game, I said I wanted the Penguins to do what they did to them a little over a month ago. And defensively, the Penguins did. You go to natural stat trick, and it confirms my eye tests from last night. Only 5 high danger chances allowed for the Penguins in that game. They were doing their job defensively in their own zone throughout. They just weren't able to get the production because, again, this team can't finish at all. But again, that will do it for this first segment. Coming up in the second segment, It's time to preview the Penguins' second and final meeting of the season against the Calgary Flames, a very middling team and a team that's already started to sell off quite a few assets. But before we get to that, we got to tell you all about FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive prompts, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. That's FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Gam. So as I teased heading into our second segment here, the Calgary Flames, a very middling team, or as the kids like to say, a very mid team. But the Flames, you look at lately, even though they've been selling off some assets, they have won 4 in a row, 7 of their last 10. They actually just blew out the Oilers last weekend in Edmonton, 29-25-5. They did just trade Chris Tanev the other day to the Dallas Stars. And honestly, when I look at that trade, not really sure what Craig Conroy is doing. He did not get any sort of value back for one of their best defensemen. That's not a good trade, if you ask me. And I think that the days of Noah Hanifin being in Calgary are also numbered at this point. But you look at this Calgary team, even though they're kind of middling, just like the Penguins in a way, they do still have some talent. Nazem Kadri, 21 goals, 51 points in 59 games. Blake Coleman has been a very underrated player throughout his career. He has 24 goals. Igor Sharangovich has also been really solid this year. But the player that has turned into a shell of his former self, Jonathan Huberdeau, man. I mean, this was once a 100-point player in the NHL, and he is a ghost now. 9 goals in 58 games this season. I understand that he's not playing with Sasha Barkov anymore, but he is still better than 9 goals in 58 games. Just what a fall from grace for him.
Yeah, you look, and one of the things that's absolutely baffling to me about this, and Flames fans, if you're tuning into this one, feel free to correct me in the comments, because you know I don't have an extensive knowledge of the Calgary Flames. I apologize for that. But you look at Daily Faceoff, and they have him on the third line with Sharangovich and Hunt, and it feels like a usage problem. Yes, he's not with Barkov anymore, who is an elite center, but you still have Kadri and Backlund. So why would you not staple him to one of the two of them and see where his game goes? And if he continues to be disappointing, then it becomes a Jonathan Huberdeau problem, to where you're looking at him and going, this is not the guy we thought we were acquiring. But when you're putting him on your third line, he's going to fall down, because he does need a good center to play with him. And no disrespect to Sharangovich, who you said is having a solid year, he's not Backlund or Kadri. Backlund or Kadri are much better players. And I said it to you before we hit record. Is Andrew Mangiapane better than him? Is Connor Zary better than him? I wouldn't think so. So
No.
Why do you have him kicked down as your third line left winger? I know he's been disappointing.
They must be trying to send him a message or something like that. Again, I don't know to the full extent why he's down there. I'm sure, again, Flames fans, if you do know, please let us know down in the comments. Or honestly, I might ask Jess Belmosto, who hosts the Locked On Flames podcast, or I can text Nick as well. They both host the show. But it seems very odd to me that a player of his caliber is playing on the third line. Again, I know his production has definitely taken a big hit, but he should still be getting top 6 minutes every night, because I remember that trade like it was yesterday. That was, I think, the biggest trade of the offseason just a couple of years ago. And I thought the Flames did what they could to replace Matthew Tkachuk. It looked like at the time it was a win-win for both sides. Well, hasn't turned out that way a couple years later, to say the least.
It really did. Like, that was the rare trade where you looked at it and went, I don't think anybody comes out a loser here. It looks like
Mackenzie Weegar is also a really good player. People forget that.
Yeah, it really filled the needs that both teams had. And as we see now, both teams went in opposite directions. The Flames are I would say, arguably the best team in the Eastern Conference right now, and a clear favorite in the East to win the Stanley Cup.
Did you say the Flames are the best team in the Eastern Conference?
Did I say the Flames?
Yes, you did.
Nah, screw it. We'll keep it in. I screwed up. The Panthers, that is. But I think Florida is the clear favorite to win in the East. And then you look at Calgary, and this is a team that can't decide what it wants to be. And I'm just talking, I'm not even talking roster here. They can't decide if they want to be a team that goes for it and makes the playoffs, or if they want to be a team that sells off and starts rebuilding. And that leads to their team on the ice being hot and cold, because they're on a nice little streak right now. They've had a couple streaks here and there, but overall, they're a middling Western Conference team. I know, throw your stones. I'm in a glass house. I'm doing a Penguins podcast, and they're the same deal right now. But you look at what they acquired and you figured, okay, Flames are back in go for it mode, and they just haven't been. And if I'm Craig Conroy at this point, especially with the Tanev trade, this needs to be your direction. You have to be tearing it down at this point, just because it's not, the Huberdeau trade hasn't worked out. Kadri's been good, but not what you hoped. And you're falling down the standings, and you look at who they have, and there's really nobody there that you can point to right now and go, okay, if we keep this guy and this guy, we can build a nice foundation around them and go on a run. So I don't know. Like, I feel bad for Flames fans, because this is a team that has a lot of history, should be good, and they just aren't.
I loved watching the Flames growing up, man. Jerome Iginla, Mika Kiprusov. I mean, those are honestly two of my favorite players that I loved watching as a little kid. And to see the organization where it is today, it's just upsetting to me, because again, you said it, I feel like they don't know what direction they want to go. And in my opinion, they should just start tearing this thing down, because I don't think they're really going to win anything with this score. I think they had their shot to win when Gaudreau was there, when Tkachuk was there, and everyone else, but it hasn't worked out since both of them left. And I think hopefully they're finally starting to realize that and making the necessary changes. We have to see if Jacob Markstrom gets dealt by the deadline. The New Jersey Devils are very much after him. And if the Devils are able to swing that trade, by the way, that's not going to be good for the Metro, because Markstrom is a very good goalie when he is on, and he's played the Penguins really well over the last several years. And this year, Markstrom in 37 games, 20-15-2, 914 save percentage. I assume the Penguins will see him in this game. He's going to be really tough to beat. I know we I wouldn't say went at Philip Grubauer for the Kraken game, but we said the Penguins had the advantage. And of course, we're looking like clowns right now because of Grubauer had one of the best starts of his career. But with Jacob Markstrom, he is a better goalie than Grubauer, and he can definitely turn it on whenever, just because of his track record in the NHL.
Yeah, and speaking of Kiprasov, the Penguins have a chance to play spoiler tomorrow night, because in Calgary, it is the jersey retirement of one Mika Kiprasov before the game. So for the Penguins tomorrow night, you got to be ready to play spoiler for a big night in the Calgary Flames organization, and you have to take advantage of that, because if nothing else, survive the first 5 to 10 minutes of the game, because you know it's going to be a fired up crowd, a motivated team. Survive that, dig in, and be the spoilers on a big night for the Calgary Flames.
That was going to be my follow-up question to you. Just what are your keys for the Penguins outside of, playing spoiler to getting 2 crucial points in the standings before heading to Edmonton to take on Connor McDavid?
I mean, the other thing is, it's not even so much X's and O's. It's right there with the Kiprasov thing. This is a bit of a fragile Flames team right now, because even though they're on a nice little streak right now, they've piled up some bigger wins. This is a team that, for all intents and purposes, with the Tanev trade and all the news around them, they know they're probably cooked. They know their GM is probably waving the white flag and moving out anything he can move out at this point. So if you're the Penguins, you have to take advantage of that, because at the very least right now, because the Penguins haven't made any moves as we record this on Friday afternoon, Penguins still think they can make the playoffs. So you got to play like it. You got to be the more desperate team. You got to be the team that's still fighting for their playoff lives, going up against a team that very much feels like they're waving the white flag on the season.
Right. Yeah. Losing to a team that has already started to sell off assets, and I think there's at least 1 or 2 more trades coming from that organization. That would not be a good look heading into Edmonton. It's also not a good look coming home to play 2 home games before the trade deadline a week from today. You can't lose to this Flames team with everyone that has left so far and everyone who is going to leave before the deadline, I think, at this point. And just because I love talking about special teams when it comes to previews, Flames 5th best penalty kill, so really tough test for the Penguins power play. But in terms of the Flames power play, 3rd worst power play in the NHL pad, 1 spot below the Penguins. So Penguins penalty kill has that to look forward to for this matchup.
Yeah. And, I mean, again, you got to take advantage of that. This team you have one of the better penalty kills in the league in Pittsburgh. Can't give anything up on that. And try to get something out of your power play. Anything. Be as simple as you can. Bodies in front of the net, pucks to the net, clean up the garbage, and again, spoil this night.
And you know what I need, I think, from the Penguins in this one? I need a vintage Evgeny Malkin game. I think it's been a long time since we've gotten a true vintage Gino game this season. I thought he started to turn it on a little bit at the end of the second period against the Kraken, had a couple of really good quality chances. But outside of that, just wasn't doing too much in the first and third periods. It's time for Gino to have a big game just because he hasn't been producing as much as lately. I mean, he's had a couple of decent shifts here and there, but I think it's time to have that true takeover game from Gino that we haven't seen, I feel like, in quite a little bit.
He started to look a lot like himself the last couple of weeks, so that's a good sign. And we would like to see that continue tomorrow night.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to do the prediction for Sidney Crosby. He shows up every night, and we'll have to see if we do get a vintage Sid game, but I want to see a vintage Gino one. And
well, I know when we're going to see a vintage Sid game, and I bet we're just about to talk about it.
That's a good segue into the final segment where Pat and I will preview Penguins Oilers for the first time this season. I absolutely love seeing Connor McDavid and Sidney Crosby go up against each other. And it pains me to say that there's going to be a time relatively soon that we don't ever get to watch that ever again. But before we dive into the Penguins Oilers preview, we got to discuss Game Time. You should not have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. It's the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show a total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. You can also buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Dam. So the second half of the back-to-back will take place on Sunday against the Edmonton Oilers. We'll have to see which goaltenders get which game this upcoming weekend. I don't want to put a guess out there because usually when I do that for back-to-backs, I just end up being wrong. Pat's the same way. So we're just going to see who Sullivan decides to start on Saturday in Calgary and on Sunday in Edmonton. But this Oilers team, really rough start to the season. They looked like one of the worst teams in the league. They played like it under Jay Woodcroft. And that's when Ken Holland decided to say, yep, I've seen enough. He fires Woodcroft, brings in a new head coach, and it's been smooth sailing ever since. They went on a 16-game winning streak this season. They've been a bit inconsistent since then, but they're still playing relatively fine. They're in a playoff spot, so everything is fine with the Oilers overall. But this is a true playoff team and a dark horse Stanley Cup contender. The Penguins are going to have to bring their best if they want to win this one, especially on the second half of a back-to-back, and especially because the past couple of seasons, Pat, the Penguins have not played well against the Oilers. This has been a team that has dominated them, and you know where it starts. Connor McDavid, the best player in the world.
Yes, and before I get into Connor McDavid, I will say this. I'm going to make a guess on the goaltending just because Tristan Jarry was a big part in juniors of the Edmonton Oil Kings. So I wouldn't be shocked to see him get the start where he kind of kicked off his reputation as a really good goaltending prospect, where it all began for him in the lead up to the pros. But Connor McDavid, man, here's the craziest stat to me. Okay. We know how fast he is. We know how talented he is. We know everything he can do. He's playing the game on rookie mode, and he makes it obvious every single night. He has 94 points this season, but he only has 22 goals. He has 72 assists this season, and he is by far the best player on the planet. You can go argue with a wall on that, because here's the thing. Connor McDavid doesn't slow down. He does everything at top speed. You watch most hockey players, everything they do that's impressive, they have to slow up a little bit. They'll get up to top speed with the puck, and then they got to take a stride or two back so they can make their move, do their stick handling, take their shot. Not Connor McDavid. He has the jets on from the time his blades touch the ice until the time he goes to the bench. And at this point, when you're playing the Edmonton Oilers, you have to prepare for them the way teams prepared for the Pittsburgh Penguins in 2010. You know he's going to get a couple points. You have to negate everybody else. Let him get his cookies. Let him get his points. Don't let anybody else kill you.
It's funny, when I think of Connor McDavid and when I watch him play, he is a clone of young Sidney Crosby. They are
better.
Very.
I'll say it right now. He's better.
That's not a hot take. I don't think. It's just that they are so alike in how they play, especially when I watched Sid when he was a lot younger. Like, Sid was that fast when he was a kid, and he could do the stuff that McDavid is doing right now when he was a bit younger. Obviously now Sid's 36. He can't skate as fast as McDavid can anymore. He can't make some of the plays with a puck on his stick like McDavid can anymore, but he could still do everything that McDavid could do now when he was a bit younger in 2010 and 2011. And I think McDavid is going to age probably just like Sid when he gets to, 35, 36. I think he honestly might turn into a little bit of a fourth line grinder as well with how he plays in his own zone. They just are having such similar career trajectories. I think obviously Sid got the cup pretty early. McDavid hasn't been able to do that yet. So that's the main thing that I think is missing from McDavid. Outside of that, their career trajectories, when you look at points and all that, like you compare them when Sid was younger to McDavid's age right now, it's really similar to say the least. And he is such a beautiful player to watch on a nightly basis. And they got to do everything in their power to somehow slow this guy down. But when he comes blazing through the neutral zone with a puck on his stick, good luck to everyone who's out there, to say the least.
Yeah. I mean, he's in his 9th season, which, oh my God, I can't believe he's already in his 9th season. But he's already knocking on the door of 1,000 points, 325 goals, 619 assists, 944 points, and only 624 games played. If Edmonton ever has a shot to win the Stanley Cup, it is this year. They have to take advantage of it, because at some point, and I know it's a meme, I know it's a joke on social media, but the time is going to come where if it's not in the next couple of years, they don't go on a serious run, he's going to start looking to go elsewhere. Just because as good as he is individually, as good as he is offensively, he is at his heart, just like Sid, a competitor that hates to lose. And he would give up all the individual accolades to win a Stanley Cup. And if the Edmonton Oilers can't do right by him, they won't have him for very much longer. So if I'm Ken Holland this year, I am pulling out all of the stops to get everybody I can at this deadline and make this team the juggernaut of the West.
And that's why they've been reported to be interested in Jake Guentzel. You add Guentzel to the Oilers, and I mean, I've made my thoughts about the Oilers, their team, and who would be coming back in a trade if the Penguins do trade him again. So I don't really like their prospects that much. The roster player that would be coming back is probably not that good. But say they did add Guentzel to their team, that makes them even more filthy heading into the playoffs. That's another top 6 winger for that team. But even outside of Connor McDavid, they still have quite a bit of talent up front. At forward, Leon Draisaitl, 73 points in 57 games. He is tremendous. Zach Hyman hit 40 goals this season. Evan Bouchard is one of the best defensemen in the league. He should be getting more votes for the Norris. Again, I would give it to Quinn Hughes this season, but Evan Bouchard is having by far the best season of his career. Evander Kane, you always have to watch out for him. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. They have quite a few very good forwards in this lineup. Defensively, a little bit weaker, obviously, outside of Bouchard. In goal, I still think they could use a bit of an upgrade over Stuart Skinner. But this is, again, a bona fide playoff team, going to be a really tough test for the Penguins. But if they can at least neutralize Edmonton's top 6, they will have a good shot of winning this game. I was watching that Calgary game that they played in Edmonton last weekend, and they did a really solid job against Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and company. They also got finishing from their players. You have both of those things from the Penguins in this game. I think they have a good shot of walking out with a win, plus potentially getting some good goaltending from either Nedeljkovic or Jari. But the biggest thing also for this one, do not take stupid penalties. The Oilers have the third best power play in the league, and for good reason. Look at the talent that they can put out there on their top power play unit. This is not a team that you want to be taking stupid penalties against, or even a single penalty against, because they will make you pay more often than not.
They will. And then the other thing I will say that, and this is kind of going to, connect the invisible strings here between the Oilers and the Penguins, is they have done the one thing that I think a lot of Stanley Cup winning or Stanley Cup contending teams should do in this modern era. They're not just talented. They're not just able to score. They can drag you into a fight. You've got guys like Zach Hyman. Yeah, he scored 40 goals this year. Still a very tough customer. Evander Kane, tough customer. Darnell Nurse, tough customer. Matthias Ekholm, tough customer. Corey Perry, the ultimate rat. They don't, you don't need a team of goons, but you need, as one of my favorite people, Steve Dangle, always says, a couple guys who can see the red mist. A couple guys who, that if you get into a physical game, those guys are going to be there and they are going to make it a long night for you. So for the Penguins, looking to get one more good run out of this core, yes, they got to get younger. Yes, they got to get finishers, but they got to get, and excuse my language, they got to get some bastards on this team.
Some bastards that can play and score, I think is a good way to say it. Someone honestly like Patrick Hornquist. He could get nasty with people.
Yeah.
Say the least. Someone like Chris Kunitz. I mean, I think this Penguins team is really missing someone like Chris Kunitz right now, because he could also throw quite a clean check, to say the least. And he could get nasty as well when needed. But unless you have anything else to add regarding the Oilers and this weekend, I think that'll do it for this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Again, I think at a minimum here, 3 out of 4 points this weekend. If it's less than that, then it's going to be even harder to make the playoffs down the stretch. Even if you win those 2 home games against Columbus and Washington for the trade deadline, I need at least 3 out of 4 points from this road trip. But
agreed.
I think, again, that will do it for this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Thank you all so much for listening to / watching this one. Pat and I will be back on Monday to recap both games and get you all set for the trade deadline this upcoming week. It's going to be a lot of fun. Can't wait to recap these games, plus get you all set for whatever could happen next Friday. But again, that will do it for this one. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll be back on Monday.